All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're gonna talk about Errol Spence Jr. Man, he got a whole lot of work to do at 147 pounds if he wants to keep his belts, as pretty much every mandatory has been called for him. But shockingly, the WBC says that it is first and may very well order the fight with him and Keith Thurman. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. We are going to be in the welterweight division again, as news has come out that the WBC says that its mandatory is the next due for Errol Spence Jr., that it will trump the IBF mandatory, and it would trump the WBA, any mandatory that he has with the WBA. That fight may very well be against Keith Thurman. Now, please note that I said very well may be against Keith Thurman. It is not necessarily against Keith Thurman, and I will explain that. Now, before I do that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. Also, want to say thank you to my subscriber and supporter, Brock Howard, dedicating this video to you. Thank you for continually supporting in the Super Chat and the Cash App, in the live streams, and in the super thanks that you can do in these videos. Guys like you and the support that you guys give is really a big reason why we continue to grow and be able to have the channel. So thank you super, super much. Let's get into this. Now, it has been reported by Fight Hype and other outlets that Keith Thurman will be the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr., or is now the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. for the WBC title, as Mauricio Sulaiman has stated that the WBC mandatory is due next for Errol Spence Jr., and that they will be designating the mandatory in the WBC convention, which is coming up. So that would put the WBC mandatory ahead of the IBF mandatory, which is Jaron Ennis, or the WBA fight that was where Errol Spence Jr. had agreed to fight Standing Honest when Standing Honest became a mandatory challenger for Yordenis Ugas's title before Errol Spence Jr. beat Yordenis Ugas. Now, I want to be very specific when I say this, for the sake of documenting things accurately. Mauricio Sulaiman did not say in the interview with Lance Pugmire on Fight Hype that Keith Thurman is the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. That is not what he said. What he said was that Keith Thurman is the #1 contender, and that the WBC mandatory is next up for Errol Spence Jr. So you can say, Fanon, what is the difference? And what does that mean? It means that Keith Thurman is not the mandatory until the WBC orders the fight with the WBC convention. Now, the likelihood is that Keith Thurman will be the one that they order to fight Errol Spence. But if you listen to that interview, you will hear that he was very specific in what he said. He being Mauricio Sulaiman. Mauricio Sulaiman called Keith Thurman the #1 contender. He did not call him the mandatory. He very well may be the mandatory when they have the convention, but it's only with the WBC, it's only when they actually order the fight that person becomes the mandatory, which is not the same thing that is going on with the IBF and not the same thing that is going on with the WBA. These people all have different sanctioning bodies. They have their own rules and their own ways to go about that. And one of the main reasons that this comes up often is because of the miscommunication, what I believe is a miscommunication about whether Devin Haney was ever Lomachenko's mandatory. If he was with the IBF and they say that the number one contender is the mandatory, that very well may be the case, but not with the WBC. Now, that aside, most likely in this scenario, the WBC is going to name the Keith Thurman the mandatory, because that is a promise that Keith Thurman said was made to him earlier this year. Said that if I beat Mario Barrios, I will become the WBC mandatory. The WBC at the time said that's not true. It's not a final eliminator. However, as you see how things played out, that's exactly what transpired. You have Keith Thurman, who was number 4 when he came back in, and then he became number 1, and now they're about to order a fight. They say the next fight is with the WBC. Our mandatory is older, I suppose, than the rest of them, and we're up next. So they're going to order a fight, and more than likely it's going to be the number 1 contender at the time, unless that number 1 contender is not available. It could be the number 2 or the number 3 guy, right? Now, does that mean Keith Thurman is going to fight Errol Spence Jr.? No, it doesn't, because Errol Spence Jr. has been very, very loud about the fact, and very clear about the fact that he doesn't want to fight Keith Thurman, and for whatever reason. So Errol Spence Jr. may very well drop that belt to fight somebody else if they push him to do it, or he may move up to 140, up to 154 pounds, at which point in time that the question would be, who's going to fight Keith Thurman, or what combination of Keith Thurman, Virgil Ortiz, and Jaron Ennis fight for that WBC belt. What I believe would happen is that more than likely it would be Keith Thurman and Jaron Ennis. And that is because I do not believe in Golden Boy's willingness to put in Virgil Ortiz in tough fights that will wind up more than likely being on the PBC. Right? That's just my thought. Now, it very well could be that if Errol goes away and they order the Virgil Ortiz Keith Thurman fight, right, it could very well take the place, but it could also very well be them ordering Jaron Ennis and Virgil Ortiz. I have a suspicion, though, that Virgil Ortiz is going to try to take the WBO route, and in that case, it very well could be a great opportunity for Jaron Ennis to fight Keith Thurman if Errol moves up. But one of the things that I want to make about this is how difficult this Errol Spence Jr.'s route has to be at 147 in order to get undisputed. Not all undisputeds are created equally. So now, because Terrence Crawford moved off and he's going to fight David Avancian for his belt, Errol literally has the Stanionis fight. If he wanted to get this fight with Terrence Crawford and stay at that weight class, he would have to probably fight consecutively Keith Thurman, Jaron Ennis, and Stanionis. Now, Stanionis would probably be one I would consider one of the more soft touches, and obviously the hardest fight would be for Jaron Ennis. But if he's able to actually achieve that, he would have to take all of the belts off of all 3 belts off of champions in Kell Brook, in Sean Porter, and Yordanis Ugas, and then defend his title against Keith Thurman, Jaron Ennis, and Stanionis. It's just that dude. It's just like not all undisputed championships are created equal, because that is taking that man through just a whole lot of time. That's a year and a half of fights right there at 147. So before you see all that go down, expect Errol Spence Jr. to move up, and then, it'll be what it is. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.